Today I'm going to just be doing a quick session where we're going to start talking about Creator and really getting more into the product. So, measure twice, cut once. That's the basic idea of what we're doing here. When you build things, you usually need a blueprint of some kind. You have to have some idea of what you're building. Most of us, if we were going to build a house, wouldn't just decide to say, well, let's just see how this goes and we'll figure it out as we go, right? I mean, we tend to have a plan. Because as we're doing things, we can get ourselves into situations where it turns out that it's going to be a lot harder to, build the next thing because we didn't plan correctly. So this session is really about just how to go about planning an application and how to think about how to translate what you're trying to do within your organization, how you're trying to get some kind of process set up, and how to then begin taking that with you into Creator. So why model your app, right? Helps determine your application scope, reduces the development time and cost, which is obviously very, very nice. It leads to a more efficient app and just overall reduced data entry, which ultimately means that you have just a better piece of software that you're using. It's going to make you more productive and help reduce potential moments where you've got the wrong data or something like that. And then even more importantly, as you continue to build the app, because usually application development is ongoing, right? That's why we call it development. It's not like we usually get to the point where we say, oh, the software, it is developed. There's no reason for it to ever change anymore. That's usually not going to happen. So having that blueprint allows you to have the plans to return to figure out what did you build, how does it actually work, and that way you can actually make the improvements. This is especially helpful if the person that, say, builds your app ends up leaving your organization, right? They don't leave with all that knowledge. They leave behind plans, and you can actually figure out what to do next without them. So, in general, you should start maybe with three questions, right? What process is your application going to be dealing with? What are you trying to improve? Second is, which groups of people are involved in this process? And lastly, what distinct pain points do these different people from these different groups face in the current process that we're trying to get rid of? Now, obviously, these questions are a bit broad, but the more specific you can be when you're answering them, when you're starting to plan what you're trying to do, the better, right? For example, if I asked, you and I said, what kind of app are you building? And you just said something, inventory management. I'm like, okay, cool. I have a general sense of what that means, but there could be a lot of variables there that I have no idea what we're talking about, right? So it's important to try to be as specific as possible and to really do the homework internally to figure out what are we currently doing, how is that a problem for these different people, how could we have it better in all of these ways, and actually, work from that kind of common piece of knowledge. So in this session, we'll kind of work with an example business at first. And this example business is called Leave IT to Us, and they do IT services. And they are, doing managed services, and they're going into organizations and helping them keep things going. So if this was kind of their current process that we bullet out, this is what we can kind of say how it works, right? Is that generally if a customer needs to have a technician come out to their office, they can only call, right? They can send an email maybe to someone, but generally speaking, they can really only call. Once they make that call, the customer support person takes the call, gets the problem recorded on a computer, prints it out, and has to distribute that in some way. That distribution is going to run up against a schedule that they're making, which they're doing, of course, in a spreadsheet where they're collecting availability and putting that in, mapping that against the different types of people that can do different things based on their certifications, and then they're trying to figure out how to distribute the work orders to all the different people with this spreadsheet, right? Once they're able to assign the job, technicians can go out and they take their paper forms with them that tell them what they're doing, where they're going, and allow them to track inventory, allow them to track the hours worked. All of that stuff is things they're having to keep track of on paper and then bring back to the office, turn that in, where it is then collected put into a new spreadsheet, which keeps track of all the work that's going on, and then all that paper has to be filed and saved for records. And then when they decide they're going to bill at the end of each month, they need to look at the big overall spreadsheet of who did we work for, how many hours did we do, run that against the different payment plans that people are on for the different packages of services they've bought, draft those or update those invoices, and then either email them or mail them. There's a lot of points where this could go wrong, right? Obviously, just from the very start of we're going to record something into a spreadsheet or a computer, and then we're going to print that out and have to now rely on this one piece of paper making it to all the places that it needs to go. That's already going to be a challenge, right? The fact that we have duplicate data entry happening all the time, a technician writing down what they've done, turning that in, or now someone has to say, what did they do, and put that in a new place. Again, another potential moment where that can go wrong, right? I'm also being nice here in assuming they're working from common spreadsheets, which of course can be a problem because that could look absolutely insane, but more likely they have multiple spreadsheets that are floating around because it's not one person who's doing it and that's all. It's going to be one person who's doing it who needs to send that spreadsheet to someone else, and they're going to look at it, and then it goes, oh wait, do we have the same, are we looking at the same numbers? Is this last week's? Is this today's? So yeah, that's the general process. So if we're thinking now about an application, obviously we've actually laid out a lot of really complex processes, right? We've put out a whole bunch of stuff. And when we look at all these processes, we're talking about service order requests, technician scheduling, job tracking, inventory management, billing. Those are all pretty big processes when we start to think about building custom applications to take care of all these things. When we start thinking about who are all the people that are involved in this, we have three pretty distinct groups of people. We might even add like another layer, which might be like executive team or something like that. So obviously we have a whole bunch of different processes here that need to line up and connect in a really intelligent way. And then we also have to make sure that we can keep all of these stakeholders that are involved in these processes happy. Because if we come up with a new system that our executive team loves and that our customers love, but our technicians absolutely refuse to do, what was that worth, right? That's not going to go very far. That will be a nightmare, really. And then all that work essentially can be lost, right? If you create a new process that customers don't really like but works really well for you, well, maybe you've optimized operations to some degree, but you've also kind of sacrificed customer happiness. There's a cost-benefit analysis there, but ideally we should be able to improve everything for everyone. That's an ideal situation. So breaking this down, we have our kind of processes, which obviously could be more specific. We have our groups, our stakeholders. So let's look at these pain points that are happening here. So customers, they can only call for service orders. It would be nice if we could give them a way to request help without actually having to call anyone, which obviously is a drain on our resources. So if we could help customers fill that out and do that automatically, it would not only reduce staffing hours and free that person up to do more important things, but it would also reduce the chance that someone is going to enter the information wrong, right? A customer is giving us information, we're taking it in, and now we're putting it into the computer. There's a weakness there. Just have the customer put that directly into the computer and maybe just build in some validation checks into that entry point, which would be like a form, and have that just being done automatically. That would obviously be a better version, a better way to solve this pain point, right? There's no centralized system, too much paper, redundant data entry. We can smooth that out if we have all of these pieces connecting into one process where data comes in and then we just work from that single file or sort of single point of truth. Scheduling is slow because it's this very manual process where you're cross-referencing systems. It would be ideal if we could just have that baked in together as well. And then billing is manual, where you're having to constantly keep going back and referencing all the hours worked. So these are some of these different pain points that we can attempt to solve by building a custom application. And again, since we can't necessarily always do everything at once, it's important to identify the pain points and then figure out what is the biggest and most important thing to start with first. Because obviously that's just where we want to put our priorities. When we're doing app development, we want to create roadmaps for ourselves, and it gives us something to build to over time. Again, development is an ongoing process, so set up this project for us, set some deadlines. We can sometimes be a little flexible on that in the early going, but we're going to try to then stick to that ongoing development process, which is going to create more and more value over time. Because we don't always want to try to do everything at once. That can become a problem. So once we have kind of started to write down these processes, these pain points, and the stakeholders involved, it's good to formulate this actually into an even more structured idea, which is a problem statement. And it follows this kind of simple idea of create something for someone to do X or to do something, right? These allow us to find manageable solutions to problems, make it easy to communicate what we're doing, and also allows us to focus on the particular thing that we're doing. So this is a good example of a problem statement. Let's create an online service request form for our customers to use, which they'll be able to access on our website, to submit order requests directly to us. That's a good problem statement. It's very clear what we need to do. It's clear who's going to use it. It's clear what it's supposed to do. We can now measure against, have we done that? Did we achieve, are we solving this problem that we have? Here's another one, right? Create a centralized service request system for service manager to track and assign service orders to technicians. This is, I guess, fine, but it could be a bit better because centralized service request system. So it's important to try to drill that down a bit more without being too long-winded. But that would be another statement. Again, another one, create a billing system for the services manager to do this stuff. Could this be a little tighter? Probably, but the idea is to try to focus in on that and make sure we really know what we're doing, right? So this is all stuff to do. Now, once we have this information that we've written out, and again, it's super important also to write these things out in like plain English, right? I was a literature major, so all that is just reading books and telling people why everyone thinks everything says something different and why no one can understand each other, right? Because that's all it is, right? Words are very unstable, very hard to actually know what any really one particular word means. So you start putting those together, that gets more difficult. You start introducing crazy jargon, that gets even more difficult. So the idea, we never assume that people automatically know what you're saying. So it's important to really use that plain English that is something that we all can understand better. But once we have that, we can start building a data model. And a data model sounds really complicated and technical maybe, but again, I was a literature major. If I know what it is, if I can do it, I feel like pretty much anyone can, right? So a data model basically ends up being something that we call, or actually can be represented, I should say, in a entity relationship diagram. Again, crazy words, maybe we're unfamiliar with that, that's okay. The point is that we're going to be able to write out what kind of information we're collecting and how we're going to use it. That's basically the idea. So let's start with the first thing, an entity. In this scenario where it says interviewers, applicants, interviews, these are entities, okay? So what's an entity? Any person, object, or task, essentially. These are kind of rules of thumb that you need to save records of. Generally, they're nouns, right? That's always a good way to kind of think about it, that are coming from your problem statement. And when you take this into Creator, these are generally your forms. That's what the forms are for, right? A form usually is represented by an entity, and you have that ability to collect those different records, or they're kind of different, it's not, you don't want to say versions, but the sort of different instances of that thing. So for example, if I have customers, a customer is an entity. John would be a customer. Sally would be a customer. Susan would be a customer, right? These are all different instances or different versions or different records of what we call customer, right? That's That's the easiest way, I think, to think about it. So in our app, which again is a simple app that we're talking about, we could obviously make this a lot more complicated. But to keep it simple, when we look at the entities that we're working with for our IT services company, we have employees, which are, of course, those technicians generally. We have customers that we're obviously needing to help. We have jobs that customers are asking us to do that we need technicians to go out and perform and keep track of. We have items in our inventory, so maybe we need to install some cabling or a router or give them a new computer or something. We need to be able to track all of that. And at the end of the day, we need to be able to track all the work that we're doing and pull that into an invoice to give to a customer, right? So these are different entities that are going to exist within our application. Next is attributes. Attributes are the details that go into a record within the entity, right? Generally, in Creator, these are fields. Same thing, how many of us use like CRM, for example, right? Fields, these are attributes as well, right? You have a lead record, and you have all this different information that you're saving about that particular lead. So that's what these attributes are. So when we add the attributes to these entities, when we add these fields to these forms, this is the kind of information that we would be collecting here. So employees, we want to know their first and last name, their role, certifications, availability, email, phone, right? For items, product, quantity, price, SKU, there's any number of things that we might want to be able to track here. And again, this isn't exhaustive, but this would be the beginning of this kind of application for these processes. So one of the things I've been talking about so far is schedules, right? Needing to schedule our work. And as you can see, employees, customers, items. Jobs over here has customer, technician, items. So we're pulling information into this one form over here to be able to do all this. So the answer I was looking for is the jobs form. That'll be where we're able to generate that. But the very thing that you said is that we're going to need information from all of these places to be able to make that happen. And that is exactly what we're going to talk about right now, which is called relationships, right? Creating relationships between our different databases, between the different tables that contain all of this different information, being able to link up all of these different forms so we can use the information we've already entered into different areas. If we enter information into what we call the items area, that is locked away, that's over there. But what we can do is create a relationship so that when we are doing a job and we need to add a piece of inventory to that job, we can go and look up what's in the items database or table and put it now into that job record, right? And so that's actually why in Creator, we call this ability a lookup field, because you're going and looking up information that you have stored elsewhere in your Creator app. Good on this so far? Okay. So this is one example of this. We have our jobs form, and if we're assigning a job to a technician, we're going to want to look up our employee information, right? And we're going to want to filter that by their role, which is that they're a technician. And then we're also, depending on the type of job we're doing, going to want to filter the certifications they have so we make sure we're assigning a capable person to that job. All that information is going to be stored in the employees table, and we're going to be able to look that up when we pick the technician to assign for the job. That's what we're going to be able to do when we create a relationship. Another example, because it's not necessarily like a one-to-one, right? We can keep pulling this in all sorts of different directions. For our customers, for example, customers are filling out that online form where they're putting in their name, email address, just all that kind of stuff, what's going wrong, Keith keeps hitting the printer and it's making us all really upset. Please come help us, stop Keith, right? That's the order request. So what we're going to be able to do is use that customer information on the job form And also, after that job is done and we actually need to use an invoice, we're going to use that same customer information to put it on the invoice. We don't need to re-enter that again. We already have it in a table, so we can pull it to all these different places. So this is in our app of the things that we've been talking about. This is basically the relationships that you would need in this application, right? Customer is going to the jobs, employees is going to the jobs, items is going to the jobs, and jobs is going to the job on the invoice, right? So my question now, why is there no relationship between customers and invoices? So what we already need from customers is already being pulled into jobs, and we're already going to pull jobs information into the invoice. In fact, job, customer, items, billable hours, all of that stuff is going to be pulled through the jobs module, which is being pulled from all these other places. So we just need that single entry point, and we can go and now pull all that other information. So in general, a pro tip here, build entities with the least dependencies first, right? Meaning that when we look at this, when we build our employees form, we don't need any other information from any other part of our application to do this. We just need to know who our employees are, which we already know. So we could take a spreadsheet, upload that, bam, we have our form, didn't require any other work to do. But when we get to something like jobs, we need to pull in employee information, we need to pull in item information, and we need to pull in customer information, right? So build the forms without any dependencies first, and then when you build the jobs form, you create lookup fields that look up those other tables to pull that in there, right? Just saves us time, just a faster way of doing it. Obviously, this one has all the dependencies over here. It's pretty much all dependencies, so we can build that last, and then we'll just be able to look up all of that. This is just a quick little rule of thumb of just preventing you from building a form and then going, oh shoot, I forgot, and then I got to go build this form, and I got to put that field, and I got to drag this field back over there. Oh shoot, I forgot, I need to go connect that one over there, so I got to go undo that, right? It gives you a more methodological kind of way of doing this. So these relationship diagrams built or written out on paper, which is really a great thing to do, super important because it keeps you away from the apps, keeps you away from the software, makes you focus on what you're actually trying to build, what's most important. Once you have that, you go in and you can build your application. As you build your application, especially if it becomes a big, really mission-critical application that has a lot of moving parts in it, it can be hard to remember how the application works. It can be hard to remember what are all those entities that we've created? What's all the data that we're storing here? How does that data connect between all those different places? How does this work, right? Maybe you built it and you're still working there, but as things just become more complicated, it's hard to visualize exactly what's happening. So in Creator, you can go to the settings and the schema builder. And what it'll do is it'll show you a visualization of your app. It'll give you a version of a diagram of this entity relationship diagram that we build for you automatically. So you can go in here and say, okay, we have jobs. Let's go ahead and you could open the jobs form and it'll take you right to it. But say you realize you need to do some work on that, right? You can hit the edit button and now it'll take you there to do that. You can also, just open it and you'll have this little menu pop out, which will list out all the attributes or all the fields that you've built into that. So you can remember, where is all that information that we've put? What are the reports that we've generated from this as well, right? So it basically gives you just a way to keep track of everything you're doing as you move forward, all right? So I'm getting the light, and I think that's all I have. So thank you.